All right, I want to talk a little bit about aversive conditioning here for a couple of slides. I alluded to when I was talking about the law of effect that perhaps we don't have to go to the negative consequence in order to decrease the behavior, knowing that a neutral consequence could have the same result. With aversive conditioning, and with those I mean negative reinforcement and positive punishment, we have some potential ramifications of using these types of methods. And it's important for us to understand these when we're choosing a method to use to modify the behavior of an animal, whether it be dog, cat, horse, or otherwise. So with negative reinforcement, remember this is taking something away to increase the frequency of the behavior. This does create very strong behaviors, but if we're trying to teach a new behavior, this can actually be a rather cruel and archaic method to do that. I don't know how many of you have been around the dog training world, but a rather archaic method of teaching a dog to sit was to use the ear pinch, and this is applied negative reinforcement. Essentially what you did is you grabbed the ear of the dog, and you pinched, and you hung on. And the dog went, ooh, that hurts, and wiggled around and did all sorts of stuff, and then finally he sat down as a way to try to get away, and you let go. Because the pinch goes away when the behavior occurs before you're going to sit to try to avoid the ear pinch. I think we can all agree that's probably not the most humane way to teach an animal. And I challenge you to not ever do that to a cat, because if a dog is uncomfortable with it, I can only imagine what a cat would do to you. There's a couple of other types of conditioning that can occur using aversive conditioning. One is called escape conditioning. And this is where the animal learns that if they do a behavior, it can terminate an aversive stimulus, hence the definition of negative reinforcement. What this can happen, though, is if you are approaching an animal and they're frightened and they start to hiss or spit or swat or growl at you, and you stop or you back away, they have learned that doing that behavior prevents your approach, which is, from their point of view, an aversive stimulus. Avoidance conditioning can also occur, too, and this is where they learn to avoid the aversive stimulus. So an example would be, if I never come out of my hiding spot underneath the bed, I never have to encounter the scary person who might approach and try to pick me up. So this, again, creates a very strong behavior, because if you never go into that situation, nothing bad can ever happen to you. When we look at positive punishment, remember this is adding something to the situation to decrease the behavior. We have some requirements for this to be used effectively. First off, we have to look at the motivation strength. Can we apply our punishment at a level high enough to outride the motivation to perform the behavior to begin with? When we're dealing with innate hardwired behaviors, sometimes this is virtually impossible to do. The animal is so motivated to do that behavior, we can't apply the punishment harsh enough to stop them. Secondly, we have to look at contingency. And what contingency is the reliability of them being paired together. So punishment happens every time the behavior occurs, but never when it doesn't. And this has to be perfect in order for this to be effective. Intensity is also important. It has to be strong enough to stop the behavior if the animal doesn't want to experience it again, but not so intense that it traumatizes the animal. Sometimes it can be a very fine line. Your timing also has to be perfect, with the punishment being applied or occurring within a half second of the behavior starting. I don't know about you guys, but that's, even for me, being a professional, pretty tight criteria. And then lastly, we have to have an alternative. The animal has to be able to know a different behavior to perform to stop the punishment from happening to it or to make it stop. So in reality, in order to use positive punishment correctly, the animal already has to know an alternate behavior to do anyway. We have to train them before we ever resort to using punishment. So a couple basic steps. As you can imagine from the things that we talked about with that last slide, punishment can be pretty complex, and it's actually really difficult to use in a day-to-day setting. And oftentimes it is poorly understood and overused and very ineffective. If it's going to be effective, it will work within 3 to 4 repetitions. So if you've had to do it more than 3 to 4 times, it's not working. Probably being applied incorrectly because we have so many criteria that we have to meet to make it work. So let's try something else. We've got other options. A couple of quick side effects that we have to think about too with these. Not only is it hard to use and applied incorrectly a lot, but they can have side effects that can be detrimental to the situation too. It can inhibit learning. It can actually make some behavior problems worse, particularly fear or aggression. The last thing that we want to do is increase aggression because that becomes dangerous very quickly. And it can increase conflict and anxiety-related problems. And remember when we were talking about classical conditioning trumping over operant conditioning? This is where it can happen. We can have unintended classically conditioned associations being named. So the animal starts to fear that person or the situation surrounding it and is unable to actually learn the operant behavior that the handler wants. Additionally, it makes the handler focus on bad behavior, and it puts us all in less positive state of mind. And damages the human-animal bond. And isn't that really why we're all here, is to help strengthen the human-animal bond?